In 2024, the Pentagon received over 700 reports of UFOs. Of those 700, 529 were chalked up to explainable phenomena like weather balloons, identifiable aircraft, and atmospheric events. The remaining 171 reports could not be explained. To say the least, my experience definitely falls into the unexplained category. Since I can remember, I've always been fascinated by UFOs or UAPs. The idea that we're not alone, that life is somewhere out there, maybe even much closer than we think. I spend hours lurking on UFO subreddits, watching documentaries, podcasts, and reading through supposed whistleblower accounts on 4chan. Because of this, I often wonder if the experience I'm about to share was intentional, directed at me, for me. It certainly feels like it was. For some quick background, I'm an average guy. I live at home with my parents in Montana, and I'm in my sophomore year at the state university. I work at a gas station 4 days a week and spend the rest of my time studying, hiking with my 4-year-old golden retriever Max, and having bonfires with my small group of friends on the weekends. I enjoy living where I do. I've always felt an affinity to the bright night sky. Sometimes, when the stars are extra bright, Max and I will walk along the canyon ridge near my house. I swear, even the small increase in elevation of being on that ridge makes the sky feel so much closer, so massive, so encompassing. On a spring night in 2024, I laid in my bed. I had a final exam the next morning, but I couldn't sleep. I closed my eyes, tried to give my brain a chance to unwind, but despite my efforts, I wasn't even groggy. I was totally awake. I kept checking the time on my phone. 12:30 a.m. Then close my eyes, check my phone. 1:15 a.m. I remember being so frustrated. The later it got, the more frustrated I became, and the more it kept me awake. At some point, I think I just accepted that I wasn't going to get my full hours. Hell, I wouldn't even be getting 6. This was my last exam before summer, and once it was done, I'd be free from school and could enjoy my time off. After glancing at the time once more, I looked over at Max, who was laying on the floor beside my bed. I swear he must have been reading my mind, because as soon as I looked at him, his head perked up and he excitedly locked eyes with me. A few times in the past, when I've had trouble sleeping, I've taken Max for a walk on the ridge, and to be honest, it's always done the trick. I always end up falling asleep, but soon after, right as my head hits the pillow. It was clear Max and I were both on the same page. "Alright, let's go," I said. He shot up and went directly for the front door, sat down, and looked at me intently, panting and tail wagging. Damn, I thought. I was wide awake, but this dog was acting like he just finished hyping himself up for the biggest basketball game of his life. I slipped on my shoes without untying my laces, opened the door slowly, and Max shot out without hesitation and headed for the ridge trail. It was our normal route, and he was just as familiar with it as I was. I guess I should mention that where we live is so rural, I rarely walk Max on leash. We've lived in this house since I was born. We know all the neighbors, even though there aren't many, and people around here always walk their dogs off leash. Cue the dog whisperers in the comment section. When I stepped out, the crisp night air hit me and almost immediately gave me a familiar, calm, and relaxed sensation, mixed with an alertness from the fresh wind and encompassing vastness of the sky above. I hit the trail that led to the ridge. The slight elevation mixed with the light from the stars and moon provided plenty of light to see where I was going and to give me a decent view of the scene around me. As I walked, I watched Max's silhouette crossing back and forth on the trail in front of me, nose to the ground, on the trail of something, and happy as a clam. It was a perfect night, and honestly, I had completely forgotten what the time was and about my exam the next morning. I was totally content, totally there in that moment. My legs burned slightly as I emerged over the last small incline of the trail. The peak that we always walked to was in view. The walls and boulders in the canyon below reflected the moonlight, and the wind picked up slightly. Max's figure bounced around the peak. That was our meeting place, the end of the trail. Whenever we'd reach that point, we'd stay there for a few minutes, enjoying the view, while I'd catch my breath and pet him for a while before turning back and heading home. I walked up beside Max. He was sitting, mouth open, panting, tail going crazy, waiting for me to give him some attention. I stood there for a while, petting his head as we both looked into the vast beauty of the view. I remember the feeling of the wind dying down. Not immediately, but suddenly enough for me to notice. I looked down at Max. His panting mouth had closed, and his head went from a relaxed position to a more alert, upright position. And then he looked directly at me, almost confused. He definitely noticed it too. I don't know, the best way I can describe it is when a brutal storm calms down for a few minutes, but you know it's not finished. Before I could think too much about it though, things got quiet. Even the wind in the canyon, there's some noise. Like a white noise that you can't really identify or hear, but it's always there. Actually, I don't think I ever even would have noticed it. The only reason I did was because it had somehow disappeared. It was so strange it kinda caught me off guard. Almost gave me a sense of vertigo. The normal sense I'd associated with this view for so many years was suddenly not there. It almost felt like a vacuum, or like I was surrounded by an invisible wall that was blocking out all of the wind. I looked down at Max again. He was still alert, mouth closed, ears slightly perked, head darting from left to right, scanning, clearly as confused as I was. The fact that he definitely noticed something was strange as well didn't give me any comfort. In fact, the opposite. I wouldn't say I was freaked out, but I was definitely put off. I was just about to turn back toward the trail when I stopped. Looking down at my shoes, the faint amount of light from the sky got noticeably dimmer. The darkness continued to stretch forward on the ground in front of me, the same way a cloud would if it was passing in front of the sun. I raised my gaze to meet the horizon, half expecting to see clouds rolling in, but there weren't any. I could see that almost the entire valley below us now was much darker than it was a few seconds ago. The hair on my arms and neck immediately stood up. Something was so off, but I didn't know what. I looked down at Max. He had the same wide eyes, ears perked up, but his head was now straight forward. I could tell he was sensing, like trying to listen rather than looking. And then the strangest sensation I've ever felt. A deep hum coming in slow waves. It rippled through my body, from the ground beneath my feet and also from my head down toward the ground. Very slow, deep, and rhythmic waves. I don't even know if it was the sound, or if it was just such a deep vibration that it seemed like a sound. A rush of adrenaline filled me. You know when you're so scared your body is hit with an intense warmth as your heart seems to drop? Like that. I lifted my gaze, well above the horizon, directly above me. What I saw I can still visualize to this day in perfect clarity. Every detail, every texture. Hell, I can still feel every emotion, second by second. Directly above me was blackness, complete darkness, not a star or a light source anywhere. I remember thinking it looked like a hole in the universe, like a vibrant sky had glitched and a huge section of it was just a black void. But as I stared up, my eyes started to adjust. Slowly, I began to realize this void had edges. In the distance, I could see where the night sky stopped and this mass began. The sight continued to get clearer, and I realized there was a shape to this thing. It was circular, but it wasn't a hole in the sky like it originally seemed. It was an object blocking out the stars. An incomprehensibly large object just floating completely still. I mean, not moving at all, maybe 50 feet above me. My heart was still in my stomach as a disorienting sense of vertigo washed over me, and the texture became slightly more clear. It looked like it was made of stone. You know the really smooth river rocks that are almost black when they're wet? Well, it looked exactly like that. My mind slowly started comprehending what my eyes were seeing. A massive disc-shaped object was directly above me. It must have been 1.5 miles across. For so many years, I had imagined what it would be like to see a UFO in person, where it would be, how I would feel. But in this moment, all I felt was true fear. Primal fear. Seeing something that looked so unnatural, so impossible, I wished it wasn't happening to me. Then what I can only describe as a voice filled my head. Not a thought, but a message, really clear. It said, "Don't be afraid, we're just observing." This was too much, and I immediately had a wave of nausea and I puked. Max came to my side with a quiet whimper. He clearly saw the same thing I did. He seemed confused, but not terrified. At least, not as terrified as I was. He was clearly more concerned about me than the city-sized spaceship hovering directly above us. I spat on the ground, trying to clean out my mouth. Then the humming sound got noticeably quieter. I looked up at the craft, and it was starting to rise. Seeing something of that scale moving so quietly was a sight I'll never forget. I felt so insignificant, so unsure of reality, of physics, of what was possible, just awestruck. It continued to rise higher and higher as the low-frequency pulse got less and less intense. I continued to watch it as it reached maybe 100 feet high. It stopped mid-air as if it was completely ignoring gravity. Then it slowly started moving north. The hum dissipated completely, and the familiar sound of being in the wind returned to normal. I never took my eyes off it as it gently but briskly disappeared over a distant mountain range. Anyway, that's basically it. Since then, I have slowed way down on my UFO research. I don't spend nearly as much time on Reddit or watching disclosure videos, but I figured I should tell this story now, in case it ever starts to fade. I hear that some people have a crisis after a similar experience. It shatters their innate understanding of the universe, who's in it, and what's possible. Essentially, they lose their mind. They can't cope with what they've seen. It's been several months now for me, and I think I'll be okay. But sometimes I still have dreams of hearing that low hum. I'm glad I saw it, but that was plenty enough.